Who is this guy? I am John Wieczorek. The surname has survived. I'm the first in my family to return to Poland in 155 years. It's very emotional for me. I am the lead author of the Darwin Core, and I am usually the convener of the Darwin Core maintenance group. I'm not at the moment because of the work I'm doing to improve it, and I don't want a conflict of interest in that respect. And any resemblance between me and the inspiration for the name of the standard is purely coincidental. It's not an effect of having worked in this field for 28 years. So I want to go to a basic level. This is about technical stuff, but it's not going to be a technical talk. I need to project a basic understanding of what Darwin Core is and how it's changing. So we can think of the standard itself in 3 layers, the first of which has been in use since its inception, and that is a bag of terms. We call it a bag of terms because they're just a list, and it's the definitions of the terms that we expect for people to use as a way of having a common language. So if we say an occurrence, we can agree on what it actually means. The second level is something that is new as of 2 weeks ago as part of the standard, and that is a conceptual model. I'll describe more about that in a moment. And then the third layer consists of data exchange schemas, the technical stuff about how to use the standard to share data. And then in terms of how it works, the standard itself is not static. It evolves over time, and that evolution comes from input from people who use it. And the management of the standard itself is accomplished by a subgroup within the standards organization called the Darwin Core Maintenance Group. And that maintenance group is governed by a nonprofit organization called the Biodiversity Information Standards with its historical acronym TADWIG, the Taxonomic Databases Working Group. So I'll begin with that first layer of Darwin Core, the bag of terms, and refer here to the Darwin Core Quick Reference Guide, which is the most popular document that is used by people to understand what Darwin Core is and what the terms in it look like. So on the screen here is just one example of one of 3 types of terms that are in use in the standard. This one is a class. It's an occurrence. It's got a capital letter at the beginning. The capital O is an indication that this is a class. A class you can think of as a concept or a table, it would be in a database, or it might be an entire spreadsheet. Okay. Then a second level or second type of term in the standard is a property. Properties are characteristics of classes. So here the example is establishment means. That would be a field in a table, or it might be a column in a spreadsheet. So it's a characteristic, it's the kind of information that you would fill in a column in a spreadsheet. And if you look at the notes here, it says that there's a recommended best practice to use a controlled value string that comes from a very specific vocabulary. And this one is one that's governed by Darwin Core as well. So that brings us to a third kind of term in Darwin Core, which is a controlled value term. So you could think of this as a valid value to use for a field in a database or in a cell in a spreadsheet. These are the kinds of things that you would want to see written for that data property. Then I'll go to the second layer of what Darwin Core is, and that's the conceptual model. This is something that has been missing in Darwin Core since its inception, and something that several attempts have been made to provide over the years. It's been recognized, and a lot of hard work has gone into making this over the past 5 years. 2 weeks ago, on the 26th of May, the ratified conceptual model became part of the standard, and now it's in production and part of the documentation available on the website. this is exciting to those of us who have turned gray in the last 5 years in its production. What this is a picture, basically, with some human readable text around it that describes those classes I was talking about, the basic building blocks of the kinds of information that we're interested in biodiversity, and the arrows that connect them, the ways that we as a community recognize that those things are related to each other. That's what the conceptual model is. Kyle mentioned that as we're moving and evolving in the understanding of our data, we're moving from the limited sense of an occurrence, where species are found in space and time, to much broader, deeper, and richer information based on events. So in the center of this diagram, you can see some different shapes. The one for event, survey, organism, interaction, and occurrence. Those are all different kinds of events that are modeled in Darwin Core now, and they are the center around which all this other kinds of information are accumulated. So we're placing our interest in biodiversity in place and time. Then I'll look at just one piece of that to cover one specific kind of use case. And here I'm elaborating on the boxes by putting some words in between them that actually describe our understanding of those relationships between the classes. So this tells a story. It's about specimens. So we can say, if we look at it, the material entity box in this picture is a specimen. And we use those as a basis of identifying things, applying a taxonomic name to it. There's an arrow, a self-referential arrow there that's new in Darwin Core that allows us to create hierarchies of material entities. So we can take a specimen, we can take a leg off of an insect, we can sequence the leg. All those are material entities in a sequence of things where protocols have been applied and new things result from them. We can take things apart, we can derive them, we can say that two things are part of some bigger thing. All of those are possible now, where they weren't before. So now, what is that material entity? That material entity might be the evidence for an occurrence in nature. I have the specimen in hand that tells me, along with the information gathered in the field, that an organism existed in nature at some place in time. That's what the occurrence is. It's a state of an organism in place and time. That occurrence is an event by nature. The place and time part of it says, I am an event. The event consists of location information. The location information might have geological context that helps us to place it in paleo time for fossils. Or it might be something like a zooarchaeological specimen where a chronometric age can be done on the material entity to provide us with a different event. Not the one when it was collected, but when the thing was actually placed in its context where it was found. So that allows me to say that a fossil specimen has an occurrence in deep time, even though it was collected last week. Those are two parts of two different events about the same thing. None of that was possible before. I don't want to go into detail or tell this story, but this is to show that the same conceptual model is telling a different story with material entities in it, but this has to do with molecular analyses. The material entity was the source of the material that was used in doing the molecular analysis that gives you different kinds of identifications, etc. But all of this resides in the same big conceptual model. So hopefully you can get an idea that we only need to use pieces of it. You don't have to do the whole thing necessarily. You need the part of it that tells your story. So where did this all come from? And why did I get involved? So in 2020, GBIF had a review, a 20-year review, that basically the basic story was, GBIF, you do what you do exceedingly well. It's occurrence-based. You need to do exceedingly well in the rest of biodiversity science. Get on it. And so immediately the next year, the strategic plan began to incorporate this advice. And as a result of that, I was contracted by GBIF to begin to work on this missing conceptual model, to use it to build and diversify what GBIF was able to consume and to help people to exchange. So we did that by pieces. We approached it from real world use cases, one at a time, saying, okay, let's talk to the specimen people, see what it is that they can't do now with the status quo technology, and model how it would be done. And then we did the same thing with tissue samples. We did the same thing with citizen science observations, and so on, for more than 20 different use cases, each time trying to find what was different, and each time integrating it with all that had gone before to try to build something that was consistent and interoperable across all of the use cases. And then as we did that, as we made stepwise achievements, we would give webinars saying, this is how we understand things now, based on what we've done so far, and to try and get feedback. A combination of telling people how far we'd advanced and getting feedback on that to see if we are, in fact, on track when we talk to the broader community. So now I'll get into the third layer of Darwin Core, which is what people actually need to understand if they're going to use it. These are the data schemas, the data exchange schemas, and they are the technical basis for the data exchange. So what has been used since the inception of Darwin Core in 2009 is a Darwin Core archive. And you've seen references to that already so far. And I'll talk a little bit more about it and how it's different from what's coming now. But basically, it's a data exchange format for 3 different kinds of data. Checklists, that's just taxon stuff. Occurrence data, which we've already talked about. And sampling event data, which Kyle mentioned, coming with surveys. And then there's a Darwin Core data package, which serves the same purpose. It's a data exchange format, but it broadens the variety of what is available, and it calls on the Darwin Core conceptual model for what its content looks like. And at the fundamental level, what it is a practical implementation of everything that we've found out trying to publish different kinds of data sets using the conceptual model. And it found, we hope, the sweet spot between the complexity that it might be and the simplicity that it can be. So keeping it as simple as we possibly can and not alienating any use case. That was the most difficult part of the exercise. So there's a lot of information on this, and I don't expect you to consume all of it, but there are 3 main points. The differences between Darwin Core Archive in the first column, DWCA, and Darwin Core Data Package. They each have their own distinct technical specifications that say how to produce them, because they are structured differently. The structure that is different is that a Darwin Core archive is limited in how complex it can be. There must be a core table. There might be only a core table, an occurrence table, that's sufficient. But if you want to add other things to it, like a history of identifications that have been done to specimens, you need to connect an extension to it. But all extensions that you provide have to be stuck onto that core. The difference with the Darwin Core data package is there's no more concept of a core. Everything is as important as everything else. Your material sample might be the most important thing, or your photograph might be the most important thing. And they all attach to each other by the ways the conceptual model allows. So the other important thing on here is the table types row, where the different kinds of data that are actually available to use has expanded exceedingly. So this is a different way of looking at what a Darwin Core archive would be. You take all of those conceptual model classes and you stick them all together in one row. That's a Darwin Core archive. So your occurrence, your event, your location, material entity, identification, maybe even some photograph stuff would all be in the same row. Whereas in a Darwin Core data package, all of those things are separated out into different tables that are related to each other. So I'd like to answer this question. Why didn't we just expand a Darwin Core archive? You know, why make a new standard? And the answer is twofold. One is the Darwin Core archive works, and it works very well and has worked very well for 25 years. If we break that, that is a huge disruption. And all of the complexity of a Darwin Core data package isn't needed by everyone. So keep the thing that works first, at least as long as nobody says, or everybody says, I don't need that anymore. The other thing that people may not recognize is that the Darwin Core archive was built on a technology we invented 20-some years ago because it didn't exist yet. How to share CSV files on the web. Now there are more than one standard, one of which is Darwin Core data, a data package, a frictionless data package. We did our research about the possibilities and decided that we would use data packages instead of W3C on the web, an alternative, for technical reasons that aren't important. These are the two reasons why we're keeping two things and supporting both for as long as is necessary. So now I want to try and give a graphical view of the difference between these things and the stories they can tell. So I'll start here with a simple, what I would call a simple detective short story that Darwin Core archives can accommodate. So someone goes in the field and sees a bee. They take a picture of it. The little icons underneath means there are people or other kinds of agents involved in the activity. The bee is the occurrence in the Darwin Core archive. It's the file in the middle. All of the other arrows are extensions to the occurrence core. So the media extension allows me to attach all the photographs I took of the bee in the field. And the ruler is a measurement or fact extension that allows me to say other things that the core, occurrence core, won't let me say. In the occurrence core, I can say what sex it is. I can say what caste it is. I can say what life stage it is, but I can't say how long it is. Can't say how many of its legs are actually on its body at the time when I observe it. Stuff like that that might be important to me aren't possible without that extension. And then the name extension is if I need to say over time how I identify that thing, a history of identifications of the bee, or through a different extension, identification history extension. And then inside of the dotted line is I decided I couldn't figure out what it was and I needed to collect it and go figure out what it was in the lab. So I can keep that information inside the core if I want to. It can be more than an observation. It can be a collecting event. So that's my detective short story. So how might that change if I do it with a Darwin Core data package? I am able to produce an epic novel, basically, if I use the Darwin Core data package. So my epic novel begins not with me in the field looking at a bee. It begins with me thinking about how I'm going to monitor plant pollination. So I'm going to design a survey that says, these are the protocols I'm going to use. And this is the place where I'm going to do it. And I decide that one of those things is that my taxonomic scope is going to be Hymenoptera pollinators. So I decide on a plot. My circle with the bees in it says I'm going to look at all kinds of bees. And so that's my plan. I set up a plan. Then once I get out there, I can start to look at individuals as well. It's not just counting the bees. I'm going to look at each one and see if I can identify a species. And not only that, because it's a pollination survey study, I'm going to record the interactions between the pollinator and the things they pollinate, which means now I have not just one occurrence in a record, I've got multiple occurrences. I've got my bee, and I've got the plant, and I've got what they did. all those as being separate entities, separate parts of that conceptual model that I'm interested or somebody else might be interested in, and that I can record things about. So here I can do an identification of the plant as well. So I've got a new identification record for a different occurrence, all in the same act. Now, it will happen that I'm not a bee expert, and at times I don't know what it is I'm looking at, and nobody who's with me can tell me. And so if I haven't seen that bee before, I'm going to make a specimen of it. I'm going to collect it so that we can take it back to the lab and be able to accurately identify such things as that one in the future during my survey. I will have my reference collection to do the identifications with. So I've added a bit of a collecting event there with my net, and now I have a separated specimen that's part of my story. And I'm able to identify that specimen to family before I take it to the lab. But now I need to do better. That's the reason I collected it. So I start taking subsamples. I create new material objects, one of which was a leg. I can describe things about that leg in itself. And then from that, I make a DNA extract. So I've got a hierarchy of material from the bee as the source. And then from my DNA extract, I can do the sequencing, and I can use the sequence to make an identification. So I'm building out the story. So can there be more? Yes, I can make measurements about any of those things. So if I put that into the picture, I take my ruler and I attach it to all the things that I might want to make measurements about. Not just an occurrence, whatever that was. I can even measure the environment and record that. Is that the end of the story? No. I can take pictures or sound recordings of everything in there, and I can attach it where it belongs. I can take pictures of the people in the field and have that be part of my data set if I want to, or of the interactions, or of the petals of or the flowers, or any part of either the bees or the flowers in the lab or in the field. Is that the end of the story? No. There's important stuff about where to find the resources associated with my bigger story. And those might be about any aspect. They might be about the photographs, where the photographs have been published. They might be which publications I used to make an identification, so the other direction. Or it might be a report about the survey as a whole that went to the government to say, what the impact was of my work. Is that the end of the story? No. The story can keep going and going and going. The last one I'll talk about, is not the last of how many there might be, are the agents that are involved. So agents can be people or organizations or even AI, and the ways that they interact with different parts of the story. So I've got my figure in the bottom right, and any of the roles that agents might play in the story can be recorded. So, do I have to do all that? No. I kind of alluded to that earlier when I gave a picture of just the specimen view, and then later of just the meta-barcoding view. Just the parts of the conceptual model that are needed are the only parts that you would have to populate, and you don't have to worry about the rest. There's also the fact that simple Darwin core might be sufficient for your needs. You don't need any of this special stuff. Fine, use a simple Darwin core archive, or that with extensions if that is sufficient. So I think I've already given an idea of the kinds of things that a data package can do that the archive can't, but I want to reiterate on some of the things. The occurrence event, that is usually if I go and get a specimen, it'd be my collecting event, usually indicates something about the occurrence. I collected it from the wild at that time and place, therefore it represents my occurrence very well. But that's not the case for a fossil. And that's not the case for a zooarchaeological specimen where I get a bone out of a buried fire pit. When the biodiversity was happening is a different time. And in paleo, even a different place. How things have changed over time. In normal Darwin Core archives, we can't nest materials and media and occurrences. For example, in a Darwin Core data package, I can tell you about a part of an image, a region of interest on an image, and make notes about that if I need to. It's very important that in a Darwin Core data package, I can describe my survey targets even better than I can in a Darwin Core archive with a Humboldt extension. Because in a Humboldt extension, the scope of the targets is predefined. It's either a taxonomic scope, a habitat scope, or an organismal scope. They're very limited. With a Darwin Core data package, I can define my scope. I can say, I am interested in tucos that are female, that are 1 year old, and are no longer than 38 centimeters. That can be what I'm looking for. And then tell you about the counts of such things that I found for the purposes of abundance analysis or absences of detection. Darwin Core archives can't do that. And so on and so forth. So who should care about this? Well, the people who have the data to begin with should care about it because it allows them to faithfully capture their whole story, not to abbreviate it in ways that might change how people understand the underlying science. The same is true on the consumers of those data, the researchers who have to try to use that information to do something and make those 3,000 publications that GBIF is getting per year based on the data. And then also, of course, the policy and decision makers who use aggregations or summaries of such information from the sources. And then, of course, the data aggregators in the middle of it, they have to try to provide for all of these vested stakeholders. So all these people have an interest in these new capabilities. So where are we in respect to all this? Happily, 2 weeks ago, were able to ratify all the changes that make all of that possible. So we're into the furthest right part of that timeline in the top, which is implementation. GBIF is committed to continuing to support Darwin Core archives for good reason, and to start to support Darwin Core data packages in the publication and indexing pipeline. It's expected that if you publish Darwin Core data packages via IPT, this is possible with the test IPT already, that they will be able to index occurrences out of Darwin Core data packages, which is what they index already. They'll be able to get occurrences out of data packages this summer. The publishing platforms, integrated publishing toolkit and the meta barcoding data toolkit, both already can allow you to publish Darwin Core data packages. We have guides and references, and a lot of what will happen now will be a combination of me working with people to understand and publish data this way, and to create some experts so that I'm not the only one, and to start making guides that talk about if you have a particular type of data, how would you do it? Give examples and show real data sets that exercise the Darwin Core data package to its full capacity. And then the final thing that happens is that now, for the first time, schemas, including not only the Darwin Core archive schemas, but the data package schemas will become part of the Darwin Core standard and managed by the Darwin Core maintenance group. Before they were GBIF things, and they had no standing as part of the standard. Now they will. There are several resources available, including some tools for how to look for the terms in the data package and how to build them. I want to echo Kyle's words in that I'm available. My job from here on out is to help people use this stuff now that it's made possible to use it. So, and a special thank you for inviting me.